Welcome into Inside LAFC podcast. We are live on LAFC YouTube. We are live on LAFC Facebook. I am Max Bretos, joined by the very busy Benny Feilhaber. Benny, before I introduce you, just want to remind we're on an hour late today. We will be back to 12:30 Pacific time next week. But I hope the message got out, and I see some people already in the chat room, but we are ready to go. It's going to be the same show.
And I appreciate the fans waiting an hour. I was in transit this weekend. I actually got to go watch the U.S. game as well, the third place game against Canada. Not great. Watched the Mexico game as well, which was entertaining. And then had a early flight this morning to get back here so that we could broadcast. So thankful that I'm able to be here today.
He demanded to be here.
That's right.
We would not miss the show because it's going to be a great show. And congratulations to Mexico for winning the Nations League. The USA, that's been a big talking point. If you have a question about that, feel free to get into the comments. We are here. We have Benny Feilhaber for 30, 40 minutes. Ask away any question, as he was at the SoFi Stadium, which looked great when it was full for those Mexico games. Not so good when it was empty for the United States. And we'll talk about where he was Saturday here. So a lot to unpack. Again, a reminder, questions, comments, put them in there if you're on YouTube or Facebook. Get them in early because I know when we get to the end of the show, there's a flurry of questions and we can't get to all of them. And we want to get to all of them. This is your show. So enjoy. Digital Chaser, first in the room. Congratulations. I will always take tabs of who is first. And we want to talk about LAFC, and it's a feel-good show. Last week was a tough one, Benny. Coming off a difficult home loss, but they went away. LAFC picking up 3 big points in KC. They get the 3 points. They also get a clean sheet, which is important, which is something they did earlier in the season. And just to set this up, this was the first full week of training. Steve Cherundolo talked about it. 4 days of training to implement ideas, to reset. Next week or this week, 4 more days of training before they go on the road again. That certainly looked evident in the way the black and gold played. There was a plan.
That helps a ton for a coach, right? The ability to have days to actually coach on the field and get your ideas in. And I think we touched on it a couple times in earlier episodes where whatever they did in the first 8 games, where they had 2 games a week for 4 weeks, it was almost whatever they trained on during preseason, because then it's more play, recover, regen, tactical training, play again, etc. Right? Rinse and repeat. So there wasn't an ability to really change too many things. And this week was the first time that Steve really was able to influence what he saw from the first 8 games or so to what he wants to change and alter. And I think we saw that. And look, first you got to also understand you're missing some big time players on the team. And we talked about it as well. Yes, there's negatives. Obviously, Denny Bouanga, one of your best players on the team, he's not there. You don't have Olivier Giroud, who's with the national team, being honored by the French national team, and a late scratch as well, kind of with Jeremy Bobasi, which maybe threw the team and the coaching staff for a loop. But at the end of the day, you get to train for 4 or 5 days throughout the week and plan what you want to do. And I think we saw a lot of positives, and obviously we're going to get into that, Max.
Speaking of the players that were gone, if you haven't seen some of the images of how the French national team and the French public honored Olivier Giroud, take a look at it. It is spectacular, and I think he's going to come out with his chest puffed out, joining an offensive team that looks pretty sharp with some new options. It's going to be a good group to be part of. Denny Bouanga, 2 games for Gabon. It wasn't murderer's row in African football, but they beat the Seychelles and they beat Kenya. So they're off and running World Cup qualifying where 9 African teams can make the World Cup. So that's good. Did also want to mention Nate Ordaz, who started this game, played Wednesday against the Houston Dynamo for El Salvador. And now El Salvador will get World Cup qualifying, and Nate's in the mix. And that's only going to improve with his role here with LAFC. But we'll get into it. LAFC continue their domination over Sporting Kansas City, including the U.S. Open Cup. 7 wins at 7-0-2 over that stretch. So undefeated. So they have looked pretty good. So we take that with a grain of salt. But as we move forward, I do want to mention that Benny's insight very valuable because Benny was in the building. You were there.
Yeah, well,
Children's Mercy Park.
I'm living in Kansas City, right? So for the viewers that don't know, I live in Kansas City still. And so very, very thankful to be able to see the team for the first time without the need of television, right? And with that, for fans that obviously go to games, you realize you get to see all 11 players at the same time. And that's incredibly beneficial when you're analyzing the team and what the positives, negatives, et cetera. And I think we saw a different team this week. I'll preface it with this so that people don't, you don't want to get all the highs and all the lows, but Sporting is a bad team right now. They're not a good team offensively. They're not a good team defensively. They're at the bottom of the table in the West. Having said that, MLS is a league that has a lot of parity, and you still got to show up to play. And within all that, I think this was one of LAFC's best games this season. And for the reason, they still defended very well, right? One thing that I saw from Igor Jesus that we'll touch on, I thought he was arguably the best player on the team. Wow. He is all over the place in the midfield. He drops into the back line to allow the outside backs to spread out and up and put more pressure further away from the box. And I mean, he's a relentless worker, connects passes. I thought he was fantastic and allowed the team to really do what they did. And from an offensive perspective, which I think is what everybody was kind of clamoring for, where is LAFC going to start getting their goals? And I know we only saw 2, but it could have been 4 or 5 in the first half alone. And they were able to get their outside backs higher up the field, what we kind of talked about. And I still think they're a little bit narrow and they can still get a little bit wider and produce some more service. But David Martinez on the left, which allows him to not necessarily cut inside, go down the line. He got his goal with a touch in beyond the right back and a world-class shot. He had I think that was Nathan Ordaz that had the cross into Hollingshead in the first half as well from an outside position of an kind of an overlapping and more numbers there in those areas of the field. And so, look, I think we saw glimpses of what could become the LAFC offense. And I mean, just looking forward, I know I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a couple guys that weren't there. I think you think about whether it's Bobasi or Giroud, service in the box is something that they will both eat up, right? Right now, Giroud hasn't gotten anything and everybody's been, clamoring for him to start scoring goals. Well, he hasn't gotten a lot of service. The ability for maybe David Martinez to play on the left side, and dare I say, Denny Bouanga, when he comes back, plays on the right maybe, and now guys are going down the line and crossing the ball, that could become very interesting. We haven't seen it work yet, inverted wingers, so much this season with this team. So I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Trundle was pondering that idea at least.
Very exciting stuff. And we are, again, live on LAFC YouTube and Facebook. Questions are rolling in. We'll get to it. Any questions about LAFC's performance, anything about the Nations League, if you'd like to ask that. And we're going to preview the San Diego game as well. I would say when I was rewatching the game and Cengiz Ünder had that cross, which was eventually put in the goal by Aaron Long, I immediately thought, Olivier Giroud, that might be his spot. That's exactly what he is looking for. And we got the goal, but in order to make him feel more dangerous and give him these opportunities, set pieces, you have got something special in Cengiz Ünder, who, among other things, when everyone returns, I would imagine, I'll ask you, does he take the set piece opportunities from Denny Bouanga, which allows a little, I think with Denny, you always look to take a little off his shoulders. I think that'd be something, as much as he probably wants to take it, and I'm sure he'll take set pieces, but to take a little pressure where you have a second option, a second really good option, that certainly might be in play.
And the other part of it is one's right-footed, one's left-footed, right? And so I think that it's great to have both options. Sometimes, I remember when I played, I loved in-swingers from further out, but the closer you get to the box, I actually would rather be on the right side of the field with an out-swinger to curl it away from the goalie. And so the ability for Denny Bouanga to potentially be hitting some of these, because he does have very good service. It's almost like a shot when he hits it, right? If nobody touches it, might go straight in. But also the ability to kind of, with the technical aspect of Ünder, put the ball into a very dangerous area and let those, the big dogs eat, and let Giroud attack the ball, or Jeremy, or, the center backs and whatnot. So I do think it provides different options for the team that, I think is going to be something that benefits the teams in scoring opportunities.
We're going to talk about the black and gold attack. So that is our next topic out of the traps here. We're going to talk about that, but I'm going to take a pause to ask the questions, which are flying in here. Gomez, always there for us. He's working, but I'm here, and he's going to ask some questions. This is interesting. Alan was first. Benny, do teams ever ask players not to do flips or celebrate any way that can result in an injury? And I think we saw that with Martinez. We've seen it with Bouanga. Is that something that's spoken before?
Did somebody get injured? I didn't see anybody get injured.
No, I guess just seeing those flips, maybe Alan got a little nervous about like, hey, are they saying, hey, easy on the celebrations?
I have never been a part of a team for someone that got injured, and I've never heard someone as a coach or something like that tell somebody not to do it. But I do remember you might remember 10, 15 years ago, I think it was Fabian and Spindola, wasn't it, in Salt Lake? And I'm pretty sure he tore his Achilles. Yes. So you gotta either make sure you know what you're doing or don't do it at all. But obviously, Denny Bouanga is extremely athletic, so when he does it, it seems like he does it with ease and grace. But I'd make sure that everybody knows what they're doing before they start flipping around on celebrations.
You would hope so. Yeah. He always sticks the landing. Ruben, who is second from the bottom in the West? I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's the Galaxy. Hence the question. You can correct me, Ruben.
It's either Galaxy or Houston. They both have 2 points.
Joe, good afternoon, Max and Benny, good afternoon, Joe. Most leagues pause during the international break, but not MLS. Do you think MLS will eventually accommodate the break in the future? Do you feel it disrupts team chemistry? I would imagine the answer is I'll say that MLS is getting better at this. They're going to take a couple of weeks off for the Club World Cup, and there's a question about that, which we will get to. They're going to stop for the World Cup. They're trying to alleviate some teams, not the whole league, from missing some windows. It's not going to miss everyone, but they've made progress. Would it have been better for MLS to go dark this week? Probably. I mean, they were missing enough players. In this case, it was good news for LAFC that they played because they may have unearthed something. But how do you feel back in the dark ages of MLS where you played right through everything?
Yeah, and I think I might be partially right on this. I know that I've heard this before, but I do believe that MLS asks teams whether they would like to play or not to play in these windows, because some teams don't have a lot of international players and some teams have a ton. And so at least they work hand in hand with the teams to some degree. But I think in a perfect world, no, you're not playing in those games. You want to go watch LAFC. You want to go see Denny Bouanga. You want to go watch Inter Miami. You want to go see Lionel Messi, et cetera, et cetera. And so, in a perfect world, the top leagues in the world go on break, go dark, like you said, during the international games. But we're not quite there yet. And for us, it's kind of nice. It's nice to be able to watch international games and MLS games all in one. I don't mind it as a fan, but you have to kind of deal with it as a club. And sometimes it's not easy.
This past week, I was at the Business of Soccer conference, and changing the MLS calendar to fall, spring came up a lot. And MLS didn't hide from it. Commissioner Don Garber and others said it. That'll go to a vote at some point. It's a matter of the owners pass it. And that, I think, is a coin flip right now. I would like to see it. And if that happens, I think you see international breaks. Gomez with a couple questions. Where is the 3252 sitting for San Diego so I can get tickets nearby? I was going to reference that later. I don't know exactly, but our guy Jimmy have the details. So check out the LAFC channels. I talked to him last night. At least 1,000 LAFC fans going down for that. And he also asked, which team do you think will pull in Raul Jimenez? He looks good in black and gold. Just saying. Mexico has the black and gold new shirts. When I was there Thursday, I must have sold 20,000 of those shirts. They were everywhere, and they look good. Raul Jimenez, it's his moment. I would think MLS would be a destination for him at some point. He has been magnificent. And it's not far-fetched to think he could be at LAFC. I just don't think right now, as good as he's playing in the Premier League, he might have a bigger Premier League club in his future.
Yeah, and he was coming back from the head injury, right, for quite a while. And this is now the best I've seen him since he had the head injury. And so exactly to your point, Max, I think we'll see him sticking out in his career in Europe, whether it's in the Prem, possibly a bigger club than the one he already is at. And so I don't know if MLS is in the near future, but definitely a possibility in the further down the line future.
Thanks to our fans, Pilar, which is my sister's name, by the way, Pilar, my older sister. Section 211. So check that if you are going to Snapdragon Stadium Saturday night. It's going to be a SoCal event. We will get the questions are flying in, but throw them in there. We will get to them. If you ask a question,
questions are fast today, Max. We can't even keep up.
This is great. It took a while, but people are flying. But we're an open book. And some of the questions are about the next topic. I wanted to go back to the black and gold attack. And what did you tell me when I reached out to you over the weekend about your thoughts about how LAFC looked in attack?
Well, this is the best that they've looked all year, right? I mean, without a doubt. And it wasn't just, okay, they scored 2 goals. That's better than, what we had seen in the first couple games or last couple games. They could have scored 4 or 5, only in the first half, right? The first half was 1-0. And I think as a LAFC fan, you almost got to be worried at that moment because, man, 1-0, we really should be up 3 or 4. Is SKC going to come back into this? And obviously in the second half, LAFC kind of shut the door and got one more. But the actions is what I was looking for. The moments that they created, right? And you can go through, obviously the goal. You can go through the action that Ordaz slips the ball or crosses the ball into Ryan Hollingshead, and it's a fantastic save from Polskamp. There's Under that mishit the ball off of his other foot, the 2-touch. It would have been the Julian Alvarez penalty kick all over again that just clipped off the crossbar. Trying to remember a couple more, but there was a few. Oh, there's the one that the long ball, I think from Lloris, I think it was, directly over the top on the left side that they got through, and Hollingshead dropped the ball to David Martinez, and he kicked it over the crossbar instead of on the ground. So, I mean, those are—
You mentioned the Hollingshead one too, where Ordaz played it across?
Yeah. To me, those are the 4 best chances that I can remember, right? It's the Hollingshead one with the big save, the goal itself, David Martinez where Hollingshead sets him up, and he kicks it over the crossbar, and Under that he 2-touched it, and it hit the crossbar and went over. So, I mean, those are massive opportunities. They're not like, expected goals for me in those 4 is like 2.5, right? You should score in between 2 or 3 of those chances. And there were some other, half chances as well. So now you bring it a little bit back into the movement, right? Talk about the movement a little bit and not so much just the chances. But man, there was some connection through the midfield. There were guys receiving the ball in between the lines. Under was coming in narrow. David Martinez was making runs in behind, which we haven't seen enough of from him with his speed. He needs to go sometimes and open up that, the depth, right? We talk about sometimes, I don't know how many people watch the NFL here, but no offense can do anything if there's not someone to take the top off the defense. And I think David Martinez did that, right? And opened up a lot of space through the middle of the field. Hollingshead was bombing for it on the left side as well. We didn't see that from Palencia. He's a little bit more of a defensive-oriented player, but that to me would be the next step, the evolution, right? If you can potentially, look, there's going to be, I think Palencia is a fantastic player, but he's fantastic defensively. Can you sometimes in certain moments of games or certain games, can you put Hollingshead on the right where he can still bomb forward? And maybe it's Molikov on the left or somebody that can do that on the left side. I mean, now you start seeing some things that you haven't seen in the attack, and other teams are going to get pinned in and have a much harder time dealing with that incredibly effective and efficient attack.
If you have questions, if you're listening on LAFC YouTube and Facebook, put them in there. I'm going to stop here in a couple of minutes to ask some more questions. If you have questions about the black and gold attack. And I like how you mentioned everyone, because Ryan Hollingshead was a menace. He could have had a hat trick. He really could have.
Yeah.
Mark Delgado and Tillman got things going. You mentioned how Igor Jesus was the entry point for everything. It was a collective approach. Kendra St. Aubin, who called the game with Tyler Terrence on Apple TV, said every time LAFC attacks SKC, looks like they're down a man. It felt like that sort of, you get that extra touch where, and that's a reflection on SKC. There's no doubt about it. Tougher teams, which LAFC will face, will be coming their way and make it a little more complicated. But you've got to walk before you can run.
Max, no, just to add a point to that, there's a reason why that looked that way. And I agree with her. And it comes from movement. If you're stagnant, right, and there's a pass to the left back to the left center back, into the 6, open to the right back, and you just tic-tac-toe like that, you never create any opportunities because it's too easy for a defense to just shift side to side. But what LAFC did, and this was one of the most impressive things that we saw from them, and I think, me being in the building is what was really impressive to see, because you can see all the pieces moving from up above, and it's constant moving. It's new angles. You have the defensive players have to go in and out of different shapes. And then what happens in those like little transitional moments in the communication when it's lacking, that's when you get those opportunities to really break through. And I think they SKC looked like they were chasing LAFC shadows a lot of times, and the movement was very, very good.
Well, there you go. Craig, Benny, I'm just a few miles east of Kansas City. I'm with you. Wanted to say that. And then he did ask, do you think David Martinez is close to becoming a regular first pick? Even though he's still young, he took responsibility and oozed creativity when some senior players were missing. I will say this. We're seeing something from Steve Cherundolo that he may not have leaned into in the past 2 years, and that is playing young players. The championship team in 2022 was an old head, experienced squad. But in this game, Jeremy Ebobisse on the bench without the senior players. Nathan Ordaz came back. And I want to give Josh Gross some credit here, because he asked this to Steve Cherundolo in the post-match, that Nate Ordaz was kind of doing what Matty Bogusz would do, is that false nine, so to speak. That's a young player. And then David Martinez as well. David Martinez, when Denny Bwanga is there and Cengiz Under, it's going to be hard to get a full 90 minutes. But I tend to think he's done the work to get the faith of the coaching staff. And now he's producing some numbers. I got to pull up this stat really quickly that I saw. He's producing the numbers that would warrant him sticking around. At 19 years and 43 days, David Martinez became the youngest player in MLS to produce a goal contribution in 5 consecutive road games. That's got to keep you in the mix, no?
Well, you talk about the LAFC roster, and, we were a week ago upset about the lack of production, but now we talk about the options, right? And I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't too long ago that Steve Cherundolo was talking about how it's so important to have depth in this league, because you have so many more games nowadays, right? When I used to play, it used to be basically 34 plus Open Cup games. Now, teams are playing 50 plus games a year. So the reality is all these guys are going to play. They're all going to play a lot of minutes. And I know Denny Bwanga, we call him the robot. He plays every single minute of every single game, it seems like. But look, it's the weather's going to get hot in the summer. There's a lot of travel. An LA-based team is going to have to travel all over the country, sometimes East Coast, obviously to the Midwest and whatnot. So there's a lot of things that are going to become a part of the season. David Martinez is going to get a ton of minutes, whether he's starting more often than an Under or a Denny Bwanga. Probably hard to see that happening, but I just think that David Martinez is going to be an integral part of that attack. And now that they used him on the left side, Max, I'm so curious to see what happens this next weekend with Denny Bwanga coming back. Obviously, you have Under and everything, and maybe there's minutes and all that kind of stuff that Cherundolo is trying to figure out as well. But I am super curious to see what happens in terms of the inverted wingers or not the inverted wingers.
Hold that thought, because I'm going to ask you. We're gonna put a wrap up this Sporting Kansas City game, but I did want to ask this question because I don't want to forget it, and I don't have an answer. I don't think Benny does, but Evan, it's a good question. Can you talk about the Club World Cup and if we have a chance of getting Leon's spot? So, in case you didn't hear, Leon and Pachuca both qualified for the Club World Cup because they're both owned by the same ownership group. That is a FIFA stipulation that's not allowed. I don't agree with it. Leon earned their spot, but rules are rules. So one of those two had to leave, and Leon, unfortunately, is the team that is getting bounced, even though they beat LAFC in that Club World Cup final. So there's going to be a short list of teams to possibly make it. I think the 3 candidates in MLS would be the 2 LA clubs and the Columbus Crew, and maybe there's one in Mexico. But when I go through it, I think we could get some big news. And what that means, obviously, it's more games on the calendar, but FIFA recently mentioned that there would be $1 billion of prize money. So that's the kind of party you want to be.
Just $1 billion?
Just $1 billion. It's like what you will get if you win the Open Cup. Yeah. And you won't be doing this podcast anymore.
Oh, I will be.
But that would be, we don't know, but it'd be crazy to think that LAFC is not in the conversation for that.
I have no expertise on the matter, but it would be fun to see any MLS team, but obviously LAFC in there. I mean, Max, you know this. My childhood team that I grew up rooting for, Botafogo, they're in it, right? So they're playing
Sounders, by the
Seattle
way.
Sounders as their
yeah.
first game, and they play PSG and Atletico Madrid. So being able to see Botafogo and LAFC maybe meeting each other in the later rounds, how exciting would that be for me?
How do you say Botafogo if you're deep in Brazil, if you're deep in Rio de Janeiro? Botafogo.
Botafogo.
Nice. You Americanized it. And I go,
yeah, I know. I shouldn't, but I don't do. I know you don't do that, right? When you're saying everybody's names, you always will announce them the proper way.
Well, I soften the edges a bit because it's a bit heavy. So what else do we have? A repeat from the great question there from Evan. I'll also say this, Evan, because it's in the United States, I would think that FIFA would lean to having an American club over an MLS club. But we'll see. Valentina Chita. Giroud will be with the team in San Diego. Does anyone know? I'm pretty sure you can bank on it. Whether he's 100% ready to go, I can't answer that, but he should be with the team. Alan, it stinks. He used a different word for Leon. They played better and won fairly, but LAFC should get the spot. I agree with you. And Ruben Buanga hasn't flipped this season yet, but he did it for the national team. So that might have been the genesis of that question. So let's get back on track. We'll get back to the questions momentarily. I want to talk about how LAFC protected the result. And we touched on it a little bit, but just what you saw when they were up a goal, managed it pretty well, I think. There was the second goal obviously helps. And Steve Cherundolo, when he was asked his thoughts of the game, he says, I liked everything. I just wish, these aren't his exact words, they were a little more clinical, and we got those goals that you touched on, which could have been 4 or 5. LAFC needs to do that if they want long-term success, if you get those chances. So he mentioned that there was that moment where David Martinez came in and got the penalty, but VAR overturned it. I mean, that could have made things complicated. But how did you see, by and large, in a game where LAFC let SKC have the ball for long stretches, they closed the gap at the end, how they were at limiting what SKC did in their attempts to get on level terms or even better?
So if you go back to the first half, they played nearly flawless, I thought, LAFC. Other than what Steve Cherundolo mentioned, yeah, you created enough chances where you would expect more than just the one goal. But other than, in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the half where Kansas City had some balls in the box, I remember one save that Hugo Lloris kind of pushed over the crossbar. It didn't look that dangerous, but some set pieces that they put in the box and a header, went one way or the other. There just wasn't much. And I thought they were very good, LAFC, from the defensive aspect. Like I said, Igor Jesus has this presence of dropping a little bit more into the back line at times when they're deeper, to allow the outside backs now to do a better job defensively further away from their box and not really allow service, which I think is fantastic from what the coaching staff's trying to get there. And obviously Igor Jesus needs to be able to provide that. So I think he's very, very good in those areas. And then you go to the second half, and I think if you're an LAFC player, staff, fan, what you're thinking at halftime is, well, we should be up 2 or 3. We're only up 1. What we can't do is come back into this second half and stand back and hope to preserve a 1-0 lead without at least, you can play a little bit more counterattacking soccer, but you got to try and go get the second goal. And I thought they did that from the get-go, right? And of course they get the goal, and this was what I was checking. They get the second goal at the 54th minute. So 9 minutes into the second half, they get the second goal. And I think then they do start dropping a little bit more, taking less chances going forward, and accepting, okay, we're not going to have the ball. This team is, I told you this, right? Sporting Kansas City is the number 1 team in the league in possession, and probably it's still in that case. I'm actually curious to see now that we're talking about it. They had only 51% possession this game, so maybe it dropped a little bit. But
yeah,
I think
they had
you're
like
okay.
70% in the first half.
Right. And I think you're okay giving them that possession, right? Because they haven't shown that they can be dangerous with it. And conversely, I think you've shown that you can be dangerous on the counter. So I think it was a very, very good protecting of the result, protecting of the lead, got the 2-0 quickly. There was no real suffering as a fan. You didn't get gray. You didn't lose years off your life in this game. And I think Sure, could it have been a little bit more perfect with maybe an extra goal in the first half to make it a 3-0 game? Sure, but I think, there's very little to complain about in this match.
Very nice. We're going to have about 10 more minutes here, so get your questions in. And I want to get your thoughts on what I'm about to ask Benny. We do have a comment from Aminu, who's joining us on Facebook. He's in Nigeria. I think he wants to see if he can get on board the LAFC Academy. I can't answer that, Aminu, but I appreciate you tuning in. We'll get to the questions. Okay. Denny Bouanga, Olivier Giroud, Jeremy Ebobisse will all be ready to go for the game on the road in San Diego. Picking a front three, we have some options, and you can tell me how it can adapt. I want you guys also pick a front three. Let me know who you think. Let's see if it matches up with Benny. 2 big games coming up at San Diego, new rivalry or what have you. I don't want to get into that too much, but that's the goal between these clubs. And then the match at home against Inter Miami. Your front three that could be most dynamic and effective. How would it look like?
Well, let me ask you a question with your question, right?
Oh, boy.
Are we talking about, so I want to make sure I answer the question properly for the fans. Are we talking about we're going into San Diego and this is like a winner take all kind of thing, a final? Or is this a game in the regular season where we're still trying to, we take it for what it is, right? The ability to establish the continuity of the team and those kind of things and make sure the ideas are coming. I know I'm ruining your question here, but I need that question answered first.
Okay.
You want both scenarios, Max? I'll give you both.
Let's just say the Inter Miami game where you want your absolute most you're at home and you want goals. How do you line up your front three?
I think as of right now, the starters for this team in Cherundolo's eyes are Under on the right, Bouanga on the left, and Ebobisse as the 9.
Ooh. And Ebobisse was on the bench. So and Ebobisse is interesting because Giroud would be an option and Ordaz. He got in there.
I thought Ordaz was fantastic in this game. He was maybe a little bit under the radar, but he's not necessarily a 9 very often. He plays as the wingers, and I thought he was very good at finding those pockets, connecting with Tillman, Mark Delgado, Under, who came, inside quite a bit, being able to make runs, sometimes leaking out to the wide channels. So he was fantastic. I don't think he's that guy, at least not now in his career yet, at least not as the starter. But I thought he was very underrated in that game when, you take everybody else into consideration.
So that leaves David Martinez out, but he would have to feature. And
but there's a big but, Max.
Next 2 games.
There's a big however. It's not a final this weekend. It's not a final.
No.
And I think what we saw against Sporting Kansas City was very good, right? I think Steve was very happy with it. I think the players sense that there's something kind of building here. And with everybody coming back, I think there's so many question marks that anybody from the outside can't answer, right? How does Denny Bouanga feel? How does Giroud feel? How do these guys feel coming back in terms of the trip, the travel? What's their mindset like? How much did they train with the team before they left? I know obviously Bouanga probably didn't, but maybe Giroud did. And so how quickly can they immerse themselves in this new kind of little tactical scenario that we saw play out in this game? And I wouldn't change David Martinez from the left side. And so I don't know what that means. Does Denny Bouanga maybe start off the bench for once in his life? Is it possible? Do you put him on the right and put Under on the bench because he's still, getting his legs underneath him? I think there's a lot of questions. And look, it's a perfect scenario for the coach, right? Steve Cherundolo now has options. I think he probably in his brain, he's starting to see relationships forming as well, right? Like the David Martinez and Hollingshead formation on the left side was interesting. I didn't know that was going to work because David Martinez is so fast and he just bombs forward. But Hollingshead was able to get there and get around him and get into the box and get opportunities. So I don't know, a lot of questions, but positive questions this week.
Very political approach to that question. If you have the desirable front three, let us know. We were going to get that. I do want to mention that everyone's healthy for LAFC. Coming off the bench, Yao Yaboa, who had a really nice run. He had not such a good shot, but he beat Jake Davis. Really nicely done. Odin Holm makes his debut. Adrian Wabowo comes in. What a great moment for him. So you see the young players getting opportunities. And who else? Smolyakov came in as well, and Kosi Tafari. So this team has depth, and that is going to come into play here as well. We are going to start our preview of San Diego. San Diego road trip. Are you going to San Diego? I know it's not a question for you, Benny, but are you tuned in and you're going to go to San Diego? We want to hear about it. Chide, I think that's how you pronounce it, had a comment. Cengiz Under. I think he was commenting about the front three, and I think saying Cengiz Under has to be in the 11. Do we pay the extra money to get Under when his contract ends on June the 30th? I don't want to think about that, but if the way he's progressing, it seems like a guy you don't want to just say goodbye to. But that's the finances are the finances. The restrictions of MLS are there. From what I understand, you're going to have to be creative on how you arrange this. I don't know if in fact you bring in another player, which, we'll see. I mean, all the conversations you're hearing about him, it would be crazy, but it's either way to have got a player for 6 months. I can't answer it, but the way he's going, I think he, as comfortable as he has looked, and as the great things that his teammates are saying, it would be hard to say goodbye. I'd put it that way.
If you look at past history for LAFC and guys that they've brought in under these circumstances, they make really good decisions whether to keep them or not, right? You think of guys like Eddie Segura, Eddie Atuesta, and during my time, I remember both those guys came in. There was, a couple other ones that we didn't keep. And so if Under starts becoming an integral part of the team, which it looks like he is going to, I mean, he is special. He's unique. There's a little bit of Vela into him for sure with what I saw this weekend. And it almost looks like he's missing just one goal, one assist to now become explode onto the scene. And so, yeah, it's difficult, especially because he's going to play a lot of minutes. And then if he becomes that integral guy, do we get rid of him? I don't think so. But again, the money is the money. So we'll see.
It is. One day those limitations won't be there, but they are now. Kevin asking, is Vela ever coming back? I did see Carlos Vela last week at that business conference, and he was on one of the panels, and he was cracking jokes. He had the whole place in stitches. I kid you not. He had some humdingers. It was hilarious. I'm talking about the relationships with Mexico. So stay tuned to the channels. We perhaps some Vela news coming out, so just stay tuned. We'll see. But we know Carlos Vela attached with the club along the way. So get your questions here. We're going to be going off the air in a couple minutes. Happy to answer them. San Diego road trip. I kind of avoided that, but let's get back. A lot of people heading down there. Jimmy telling me at least 1,000. I bet you that number goes up. Snapdragon Stadium, 35,000 seats, and it's a big place, so you can accommodate a lot of traveling supporters. First time these two teams met. San Diego lost this weekend in Austin, but prior to that, they were unbeaten. They play a certain style where it's on the front foot. They have some former LAFC player, Tommy Angel, Luca Bombino, who's playing all the time. We don't know about Chucky Lozano, whether he's coming back. It's getting closer, but who knows if it's this week. The one thing about San Diego, and this is a chance for LAFC to get another road win and really position themselves and a chance to score goals against this team because they'll give up some goals. The thing that they have done is they've caught teams by surprise. But with LAFC, 4 days to prepare, I think they'll be ready, and that might take away a huge edge for San Diego FC. But this is going to be this is going to be the first of many games between these two, and we look forward to a burgeoning new matchup here on the West Coast.
We can't take anybody, unseriously, Max. We've seen, expansion teams. We were one ourselves not too long ago, and we remember what that season was like. It was memorable, and teams come out hot with the way MLS works and the ability to build a roster. San Diego looks like a very good team, and there's no chance that we're going to take them lightly. So hopefully we come prepared and ready to get a result.
Question about Ryan Hollingshead's contract. It's coming up at the end of the year. I think they'll find a way to get that done, and I think Ryan wants to stay, but that's between them.
Gotta get it done. Gotta get it done.
He keeps getting better. I'm almost at the point with Ryan. I go, the national team should probably give him a ring.
One of the top outside backs in MLS, without question.
Oh, here we
Both
go.
sides.
Any plans for Inside LAFC to have guest appearances from players or staff? That's in the works. We're in diapers here. We're just getting our legs, but we'll have some fun stuff coming over. But we appreciate you guys tuning in and making this. We enjoy doing the show. I know Benny wouldn't miss it for anything. Gomez, game worth 6 points here and get ahead of them, talking about San Diego. LAFC, we panicked after the Austin result. If they beat San Diego, they'll probably be in first place in the West, sitting pretty, heading into another demanding stretch with everyone available. So that's another big spot here against a team you probably should beat, even on the road.
Does Vancouver not play this weekend? Is that what you're saying?
But they lost. They do play, I believe.
They got 12 points, right? So unless they lose, then they'll still be in first. But we're right there. I think we're tied for second place, aren't we? Aren't there like 2 or 3 teams?
Second place, yes.
We're right there. So that's, early days. I think we should be excited about what we saw and the potential what this team has. Because, we go back to some of the conversation that we had earlier, Max. The defense is still very reliable, looks very imposing and difficult to break down. And with the cast of characters that we have going forward, there's going to be goals. We are going to find goals somehow, some way.
And the defense is watertight. I apologize for erroneous information. Thank goodness for Benny Feilhaber, our crack editorial staff, for locking that down. Great format this year. They love the pod. We're going to be here all season, folks. Tell your friends. As this will be a great outlet every Monday, 12:30 Pacific time, LAFC YouTube and LAFC Facebook. Good stuff getting back in time, Benny. We'll see you again here next Monday.
Can't wait.
I will do some LAFC games, Gomez, coming up in late April, so stay by. A couple home games coming up. That's for another day. We'll talk to you very soon. Inside LAFC podcast.